teammate back in the 80s at Alabama, and of course, a longtime high school and college football coach, South Alabama Jaguars, first ever head coach. Joey, thanks so much for taking the time to be on the show.
Oh, man, glad to be here. Great to see you, man.
Turn up the volume. Let's start from the beginning. You grew up in Mobile. You went to Murphy High School. Of course, you and your mom were real close. Talk about growing up. I know your dad passed away at 10, if you wanted to talk about that. But talk about your childhood and multiple sports that you played.
Yeah. Well, I obviously grew up in Mobile and had my mother and my father had both been married before. They got divorces, married each other, and I kind of popped up. They weren't planning on having any children, but I kind of just popped up there. They were 42 years old, and but anyway, just had a good relationship with those guys, and they were great moms and dads, and ended up getting divorced. And my father died when I was 10, and my mother, passed when I was 27. Had a stroke when I was 22, right after I got married. Which you know my wife Elise, and so she had a stroke that year, and 5 years later died. So yeah, but the childhood was good. Really enjoyed growing up in Mobile. I thought it was a great sports town, and a lot of the toughness I think playing Little League football came from that. A lot of toughness I had came from the Little League football with Steve Rogers being the head coach and just kind of going through two-a-days as 7-year-olds and bull in the ring and all those type things, So it was fun.
You also talk about in your book, and we're going to get into your book a lot here in a little bit, In Good Hands.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about, number one, how did you have the foresight to keep an audio journal in college? And every high school kid that went to college, I advise them to keep a journal. Even if you wrote in it just once a week, you will be glad for the rest of your life, and your kids and your grandkids will be glad. Who approached you? But what a great idea that was.
Well, Daryl Ray, who wrote the book, actually, I just would just, send him notes once a week, and I never thought about doing it. But when he called me about doing a book, that's what he asked me to do. So that idea actually came from him.
Wow.
Yeah. Good idea, though.
It was great. Let's talk about playing backyard football. I mean, I don't think there's enough backyard football games anymore. I was the youngest of 4 boys, right? So I was always playing with my bigger, faster, older, stronger kids than me. And I think without my older brothers, I don't think I would have made it. Talk about those backyard games where you call it pick up and smear the queer. We used to call it.
Yeah, I don't think I could say that these days. But anyway, back in the 70s, that's certainly what was going on. You just, a lot of the guys, there were no video games, as you know, that we had during those days. And so we had to go out and there's 3 TV channels. I know it was Channel 3 in Pensacola, right? And Channel 5 and 10 in Mobile. But anyway, my dad would tell me to get up and move the antenna and keep twisting the antenna until it got clear on the screen. And so I didn't want to watch Lawrence Welk and with my parents. So we actually went out and rode bicycles and shot BB guns and played football, played basketball, played pick up and smear and whatever. So it was kind of outside till dark. My mother got mad when I came in after dark. So I knew to be in at about 15 minutes before dark. So, but spent most of my time outside. I really enjoyed it.
Joey, let's talk a little bit about your years at South Alabama. 10 years, 2008 to 2017. You had some really good years, great wins, great players, and specifically and ironically, a player we both coached, Jeremy Reeves. But talk about JR and some of the other great memories that you have at South.
Well, the first thing and the thing that comes to mind with Jeremy is just his mental strength and just the positive attitude he has on life. And he just always thinks he can do something. And I believe, we can argue whether, is he tall enough for the NFL? Is he big enough? Well, I don't know, but I know one thing. His mind is as strong as any player I've ever had, probably any person I've ever had, to be honest with you, that I've ever met. He's just got a great outlook, and I think his mind takes him to places that a lot of other people don't get to. And then that's what I've noticed about him. Just love being around him. He taught me a lot. Hopefully he learned maybe a couple things from me, but boy, I tell you, I learned a lot from him.
Well, I did too, man. What a joy he was to coach. He's it's that when I interview elite players or Hall of Fame players, I always ask them the question, talent or intangibles, and 9 out of 10, almost 10 out of 10 say intangibles.
Right.
That's what, it's almost the it factor, right, Joey? It's hard to pinpoint it. It's hard to define it. It's hard to objectively, measure it. But when you see it, it's there. And
Right.
he has the it factor. What were some of the challenges at South Alabama that you faced?
Well, I think obviously building a program from scratch was very difficult. From going, basically, we were club football the first year. The second year, we moved to Division II. The next year, we moved to the FCS level. The next year, we transitioned it into Division I. And then the following year, we actually played, full, Division I schedule, FBS schedule. So I think just the keeping up with the recruiting through those years, because when you at first it's hard to get Division I players because you're playing Division II and whatever we were playing during those first 3 or 4 years, and so you really couldn't start getting those Division I players in until you went Division I. They wanted to see the schedule where we were playing against the Troys and playing against North Carolina States and Mississippi States and Louisiana Lafayette's and all those. So that was probably the toughest part because you had to have enough players on your team during those years to win. And so what do? In those days you couldn't let them go. Nowadays it's a yearly contract, and if you want to quote let someone go, you can and just add more to your list. But that wasn't the way it was in those days. It was a 4-year contract, and you couldn't just cut kids. So you were, and I don't want to use the word stuck, but some of the players that may not have quite been Division I players are still there, and you were trying to fill in. So that was probably the most difficult thing that I think we encountered.
Joey, I had to cover you hundreds of times in practice, and I always had to turn my hips just a little quicker for you because you were the fastest Caucasian I ever covered. Period. College pros. Did you run track against Herschel Walker and Bo Jackson?
Actually, yes. It's kind of funny. I only ran 1 year in high school because I played baseball, and I'll get to your question in a second. But I ran my senior year. My track coach got me out because I always played baseball. So obviously those 2 seasons were at the same time.
Right.
So basically I went out and ran track meets on the weekends, and I practiced maybe some handoffs with my 4x1 relay team and that kind of thing. So I ran track my senior year, did pretty well. And then when I went to Alabama, the track coach asked me to come out on the track team because they needed another leg on the 4x1. And I was actually the 4th fastest guy on that team. We had some real fast guys on there. Calvin Smith, as you might remember, who actually had the world record.
World record holder, gold medalist.
I think he ran 9.91 in the 100 meters. And I'll never forget. I'm going to get off the story, but anyway, in January we're working out in the lower gym, and we're doing our starts. It was so cold outside, and I'm running with the guy. I'm for 20, 30 yards. I'm like, who's this guy supposed to be so fast? And it warmed up, and we got out on the track later that month or whatever. And man, I had never seen him. He was probably 135 pounds, 5'7", and could fly. I mean, just unreal to see. I've never seen anybody that fast in my life to that point. But anyway, so that year, we ran, and I just ran on the relay team. They threw me in the 100 a couple times because I ran a 10.5, whatever. So it's still good, but not SEC fast. So one of the meets I remember was in the SEC championship. We had just run the 4x1. We did well, and anyway, so I'm lined up in the 100 meters, and I look to the left of me, and lane 4 was Herschel Walker. And there I was on the right hand in lane 5. And man, of course, I'm looking up at him and so, it's always been those big traps on him, those trap muscles.
Traps,
And I said, man, and it's just kind of funny. And this is not the reason he beat me, but I was just so mesmerized by looking at him, just how big he was. For the first 40 yards or so, we're pretty, pretty neck and neck and all that.
Yeah.
And to see that big guy at 235 pounds just take off. And I think he ended up running 10.18, something like that at 235 pounds. I'm like, I've never seen anything like that in my life. So, yeah, and I argue all the time that probably the best three running backs there's ever been in one era, as you know, are Bo Jackson, Herschel, and then Marcus Dupree, who played with Oklahoma from Mississippi.
Right. Hey, I'm reading a book now. Jeff Pearlman wrote Bo Jackson's biography. So it talks about his exploits in track. It talks about his exploits in track and everything. Do you have a book that you recommend? Because I got a segment on my show, sports books worth reading. Some are and some aren't. That book is worth reading. I just got done with a book on Jim Thorpe, right? Jim Thorpe Award, the great American Indian. Yeah, what a great book that was. That just came out. But do you have any books that you refer to or you recently read that's important?
I think that if football goes, and I think this is a little more in the coaching world, but that obviously with my profession, that's the type books that I would like to read. Mm-hmm. Coach Walsh's book, from the 49ers, I really believe the organization there and the things I learned from that book really helped me. Obviously, and this wasn't a book, but we had a book right in front of us, with Coach Bryant and just being around him, and I learned a lot of things there. So, but yeah, I think that book was probably one of the most influential books as far as my coaching career.
All right, let's get in and talk about our coach, Coach Bryant, our mentor. Coach Ryan was a master motivator. You call him a psychic in your book. My meeting with him in 1982 changed my life forever. Talk about some of your interactions with Coach Bryant.
I think that probably what I liked about him was he was the same in front of us as he was in front of a news camera or speaking at a banquet or, whatever it may be. I just always felt like he never changed. He wasn't this guy that was different behind the mic and different in front of us. And I just liked it just as, the way he made you earn things and the toughness aspect. And as you know, he got guys to play extremely hard. And I do think that is lost in this game. It's not lost. It's almost, I don't always use the word very rare, but I think that is not talked about in coaching enough, where it tends to be more scheme and getting athletes to get the fastest, biggest guys. And that's certainly important. But whatever guys you get to recruit and get them out there, I think if you can get them to play hard, that's I don't know what percentage it is, but it's a large percentage in the success of that team.
I had one one-on-one meeting with him, and it was 1982 of August. And I don't think I've told this story on my podcast yet, but I was, practicing for 2 years, never dressed for a game, over, 500 workouts with Al Miller. And I was home in the summertime. They called me up. We don't have room in the Bryan Hall. You're going to have to move out. So I came down, and first day of practice, I was just going to psychologically go through the motions. Right. And he calls me into his office and says 3 sentences to me, Joey, and he blows me away with every one. He says, "Paul, did you find a place to stay?" And I was kind of, taken aback. I thought maybe I was going to get cut, right? I was scared to go in there. Everybody was scared of him, right? So I thought I was going to get cut. I wasn't the perfect guy. I was doing things probably I wasn't supposed to be. So I thought maybe he caught me doing some of those things. I want, and cut me. So he looks at me and he says, I hope this doesn't affect the way you play on the field. And I said, "No, sir, it's not." And he looks at me and he says, "I didn't think it would." And that's all he said. It just blew me away. And I ended up going to Georgia Tech. Remember that first game at Georgia Tech, 82? We'd go to Atlanta, and I'm standing on the sidelines, just taking everything in. And somebody jabs me and says, "Coach Bryant's calling your name." And I said, "Well, I didn't hear Tripodi come from him." So he says, "He's calling you." So I get up there. He says, "Get in for Stan Gay." I looked at him. I said, "Now?"
Yeah, now.
So, the rest was history. I mean, he was amazing. He'd bring in, famous people, ex-Bama players, Joe Namath. I remember he brought in Leroy Jordan to speak to us. And in team meetings, Joey, let our audience know that he would bring in a little ditty and talk
Right.
about, whether it was Ann Landers article or a column or something that he read somewhere and related to life lessons.
Oh yeah, it was awesome. I almost anticipated that each meeting that he would be in, because I always wanted to hear what he had to say, and a lot of it made sense. And it was just kind of just real life lessons, and there's more to football than just winning games and that type of thing. And he taught us about life, and I think probably looking back, I remember him. And you may refer to this later or not, but you knew I was, I was fifth string my sophomore year, and all the guys got hurt, and finally got a chance to play. And I'll never play. We were playing against Georgia Tech, and then they would play Kentucky the next week. And I started the next week after, because I kind of won. I guess I'd won the job. I didn't think I'd won the job in the Georgia Tech game, but anyway, I started the next week, and from that point forward, I started from that point forward, and I think that he came up to me after the Kentucky game, and I was really beat up. I'd returning punts and, kind of got knocked around a lot and had a big cut on my face, and, my knee was sore and had a big old bruise on my ribs and whatever. And he just kind of came up to me and just put his arm around me, kind of looked at me, smiled, didn't say anything, kind of like you're talking about. Just kind of didn't say much, but it was just like that moment. It was, I knew that I'd made it with him. I'd kind of proven to him through hard work and through time, he didn't give me anything.
Nope.
And it was awesome. So from that point forward, I felt like I could do anything. I'd conquer the world.
He gave you a nickname that I'll never forget in my lifetime, because I always remember him calling you Little Big Man. I mean, nicknames, Joey, nicknames are important. I do a segment on my show about nicknames. My dad gave me all these nicknames: Charlie Rockbottom, Henrietta Butterfield, Speedy Gonzalez. My dad gave me all these names, and I always, when I coached, I almost gave everybody a nickname, Joey. Mm-hmm. I felt it was endearing. Other kids would start calling him by that nickname, but and then I realized that Coach Bryant knew what nicknames do. When did you first remember him calling you Little Big Man?
I think it was on, I really don't know exactly, but I do think it was on the Coach Bryant show, one of those mornings. It's Sunday morning after the game, and we'd always get up and watch it. It was just so funny listening to him, and but it was I think it was one of those games, and I can't remember which one.
All right. Mm-hmm. I'm going to read a little section in your book on page 96, just because this exemplifies Coach Bryant's demeanor and everything else, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
In your book 96, you say, I remember listening to his radio show, The Bear Line, one night, and I heard a little boy call in. Coach Bryant, the boy said, I have a problem. I play peewee football, and everybody I have to block and tackle is about a foot taller and 50 pounds heavier. What can I do? This is Coach Bryant's answer. First, son, let me tell you that you do have a problem. If I were you, I would mind my parents, study hard to get smarter, eat the right foods, and pray to the good Lord to make you stronger. As for now, son, stay down around their feet, no matter how big they are. If you take their legs out, they can't run. Then, of course, there were calls from middle-aged men who just wanted to say, why did you run to the short side of the field when you had all that room to the other side? And Coach Bryant's response was, I was trying to win. But the calls from the children was the one he enjoyed most. You say he would always take more time with the kids, and you could almost hear the laughter in his voice. My favorite call is a little boy around 5 years old. Coach Bryant, the boy asked timidly. Yes, I just wanted to talk to you. Good, because I want to talk to you too. Your call flatters me. They talked for a while, and the conversation ended something like this. I love you, Coach Bryant. I love you too, son. I want to play for you, Coach Bryant. You better hurry, Coach said. I mean, he had all these ditties. He always said the right thing at the right time. And he was always kind. You see these coaches now, they're mean. They talk to the media like, they have a like some kind of regret or vendetta or anger against them. But he always knew how to talk to people, whether it was a janitor or the president of the United States. I read there's The Last Coach is a really good book, right, Joey, by Alan Vera. And that really exemplifies, what he was like. I think it was he met a president one time. I think it was Johnson, the big tall guy. And President Johnson said, "Boy, you're a big one, aren't you?" Coach Bryant said, "You're a big son of a bitch yourself."
Yeah, I mean, he just had that way, and people ask me all the time, who's the best college football coach of all time? Which I know I'm going to be biased, and the reason I always say Coach Bryant is you can argue whether who won the most national championships, who was very best at their time in their era when they coached. Well, it's kind of comparing apples to apples in some ways, right? Apples to oranges. I'm sorry.
Right.
It's a different era. So you can't really compare that. But the one thing I could say, I would take Coach Bryant every time. And, obviously Coach Saban, there's, obviously got to be mentioned there, obviously. But what I would say about Coach Bryant is what you were just talking about. He endeared so many people endeared him that it was almost like family in the state of Alabama. He brought Alabama football together. And for generations, I mean, how many people still talk about Coach Bryant, at this point? Because even my mother, when she would come to practice, he would come down out of the tower, come give her a hug. He might not talk to her very long, but he would go and recognize her and hug her. And he was just that kind of man, just a real genuine man, as you know. Yeah. To me, that's what separated him. Certainly, we could argue football, X's and O's, recruiting, blah, blah, blah. But that element right there taught me a lot in my coaching is how to treat people, to separate the football business and the people business at times, where anybody you meet, treat them with respect. And I kind of learned that from him.
Mm-hmm. I learned how to respect my mother from him. He was always, talking about calling your mama. I mean, that was huge. My dad came down to practice that year in '82 for a week and just to watch practice. And he walked all the way across the field, found my dad, knew he was coming somehow. I think Coach Kriska had something to do with it. And he found my dad, and they walked all the way, from the tunnel to the tower. Mm-hmm. And my dad's a 5'7" Italian from New York. Okay. And you know how hard Coach Bryant was to understand.
Mm-hmm.
My dad said he couldn't understand one thing he said, except for you got a good boy there. That's the only thing he picked up out of the whole conversation. But he was like that. He was mumble, even when I came down, of course, having a dialect from New York, I was hard to understand myself, and it was hard for me to understand. But he was almost impossible, even to the Southern people.
You remember when he had practice, when he would yell something on the megaphone and nobody knew what he said? The coaches just said, "Okay, just run the play again, they couldn't understand it.
They were just as scared of him as we were. The coaches were. Oh my God!
I think they were more scared of him than we were. I really do.
They were, especially when he came down from the tower, because you don't know if he was coming after a coach or a player.
Oh yeah,
he would do both coming down from the tower. It was just a bad thing. But you know what? I learned so much from him, and I coached with his style and his philosophies and things like never blaming the referees. He always took the blame for our mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great lesson to learn for coaches, is never ever throw your players under the bus or talk about them in the media in a negative light. And, just so many little things. And then it was that day when he passed. I was at the water fountain working out, getting a drink from working out with Coach Al Miller, Miller time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But talk about that. And I know your roommate, Paul Ott-Carruth, was a pallbearer.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, all the players were, but that funeral, it was amazing to me. And it was my worst birthday, because December 14th, 1982, that night you were studying with McQueen or somebody and you missed the meeting. And that was my birthday. And he come in on the 14th, an emergency meeting. That's why he probably missed it. And he told us that he was retiring. It was my worst birthday in my life, Joey.
Wow.
And then the next day, he let everybody know and just died shortly 5-6 weeks afterwards. But
wow.
yeah, talk about that. That the funeral was like for a president or more.
Yeah, I remember me and Mike Adcock were in the car right by Tutwiler. We're in the car turning at that red light, and we heard it over the radio. That's how I found out about it. Of course, I just remember just both of us just sinking in our chairs, or in our seats of the car. But anyway, yeah, it was just a tough deal, and this all happened so fast. And the funeral was kind of a little bit uplifting to me. I mean, I remember thinking when when he was in the casket, and I swear I thought he was going to open up the door of the casket. That's what I thought about him. I really believed that. I mean, at that time, obviously, wasn't very, that wouldn't come true. But I had so much respect for him and thought that he was, just such a great man that I thought he was going to just push out, hey guys, I'm back, and but anyway, so I remember driving down I-20 59 to Birmingham, and people hanging over the crosswalks of the overpasses over the interstate, and all the signs and sheets with, we love you, coach, and all that kind of stuff all the way. And, but that part of it, you realize what a man we played for and how well respected and that he was. And so, I believe that, he knew where he was going. So I don't think he had any issues with after the afterlife. And so I felt good about it. So I just, it's kind of a peaceful day for me in some ways.
He was a godly man. He surely was.
Yep.
And nobody, he's the greatest of all time. You could, I go on my show or I argue with anybody. It doesn't matter to me that he was the best of all time. It's not even close. And if you want to say otherwise, go ahead. But you didn't know the man like we did.
You're right.
And, he had to be, Saban's got all these assistants and recruiters and all these professional psychologists, Dr. Mowad, all these guys that come in. He had to do all that stuff. We had one strength coach. Now, granted, he is on the American Strength Coaches, Mount Rushmore. Al Miller definitely is.
Right.
So we were lucky. We were lucky to have him as well as a strength coach.
Oh my gosh! I wrote Coach Miller a letter about a year ago, probably, but just thanking him for all he did for us and me. And he probably, as far as just a pure football player, motivated me probably more than anybody at Alabama. And that's just me talking for myself. But I just respected him so much, and he was that tough guy that. And I already had some toughness, obviously, but I think he carried my toughness to a different level. I mean, it's that the mental toughness, not being scared of anything, and
right.
I go across the middle and catch a ball and never think about getting hit. And part of that was because of him. He just instilled that in me.
Yes, he did, Joey. I'm glad you said that, and I'm glad you wrote him a letter. I was without him. We spend, and people don't realize this, but the players spend more time with the strength and conditioning staff than they do with their position coach, and definitely not the head coach. So he was a huge influence on me. I would have never played at Alabama in the pros if it wasn't for Al Miller. There's no question. Right. Yeah, there's no question. No question about that. Yeah, there's no question about that.
Yeah, he did. I did see him though a few years ago, and it's funny. He goes, "You remember those push presses we did behind our neck, and we push the heavy weight up and drop it on the back of our neck, And he said, "Hey, boy," he said, "they should have fired me a long time ago for doing that to y'all." And we all had scabs. Remember, we had scabs. We had big scabs on the back of our neck where you drop about 225 pounds on your neck, and then the box jumps. You remember the box jumps?
Yeah.
Oh my God, we did them almost every day, and and now they found out that ain't so good for you these days. So, but he was apologizing and laughing, and of course I
Maybe
was
that's why
laughing.
my shoulders are messed up now to this day. Oh my gosh. He was, we called it Miller time, and it wasn't time to go have a beer either.
Yeah, it was
It
not.
was just the opposite. Yeah, it was just the opposite.
But I'll say this, and we all worked hard, and he knew that I wasn't approaching him trying not to come in and do less work. But I walked into him. We were doing some heavy squats, and I was already kind of running a pretty good 40 and all that. So I just went to him and said, Coach, I said, I'm scared to do, these heavy squats. And you know what he did? He designed me a workout. Like, this is a little bit anti Al Miller,
Yeah,
he actually designed me a workout separately from the heavy squats. I would do some lunges, and I don't know if you even knew that, but he, back then, weightlifting was, everybody followed A, B, C, D. Everybody did the same thing, right? Pretty much. Right. And so for him to get off that track and let one of his players do something different, it shows you how smart he was too, because, like it was, after I ran track, and then I'd run a pretty good 40 time for Coach Bryant when he was there. And then, and so I think he agreed in some ways. I mean, but he knew that I wasn't trying to get out of work. It was
right. He knew you.
Yeah.
So he was
so
okay
I think
with
that,
it. Yeah.
I always thank him for that too.
All right. So let's tell one more story about Coach Bryant and Al Miller. The 82 Coach Bryant's last game in Liberty Bowl. We all had to meet in Memphis on Christmas Day. And Christmas Eve, I stayed up and drank way too much with my buddies on Christmas Eve. Got to bed at like 5. My mother woke me up at 5:30 to go to the airport. and we get there. Coach Bryant says he knew. He wasn't stupid. He knew we were drinking and stuff. So he said, all right, boys, let's go work out. And oh, my gosh, are you kidding me? I
always wondered why they ran us like that. That was because of you.
No. I can't believe I didn't throw up. I mean, even the plane flight hungover was bad. But to get there, and then he walks over to Al Miller. He walks over to our strength coach and says, Al, you run them. So Al made us run. I don't know if you remember this, but we in that gym, we must have did 40 sprints in a row. And an offensive lineman, the starting offensive lineman, pulled a hamstring. So after a while, Coach Miller didn't care. He just kept going. After a while, Coach Bryant walks over to Al Miller and says, Al, I told you to run him, not to kill him. Now, for Coach Bryant to say something like that to another coach just tells you how tough Al Miller was. But I'll never forget that.
Oh, yeah, that was that. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And, I kind of didn't know why. I didn't really know what I guess he thought everybody probably had a good time on Christmas Eve.
Right, at home a couple of days. Yeah.
It's just like kind of after spring break, when you come back from spring break, you have spring training, you kind of use that next day to run all the sweat things out of them, so to speak. But maybe that's what it was. But and remember I was indoor at was that some gym we were in?
Yeah, some gym, because it was raining out all week. And
I remember that.
It was pretty warm that week, but the day of the game was freezing cold.
Oh, yeah. It was chilly.
Jeez. A couple of months ago, Joey, you were hired at Mississippi State and to join Zach Arnett's staff as director of player personnel. Talk about your new role. It's fun. I think you have Alabama and Coach Steve Campbell, the second ever head coach at South Alabama, was hired as to take, because he knows Mississippi. He coached in Mississippi for all those years. That was a brilliant move by Coach Arnett's to get you two guys.
Well, I don't know if it was or not. We'll see. But, actually it's working out real well. And they brought me over here to just recruit the state of Alabama and Steve from Mississippi, like you mentioned. And just because of the contacts we have with the high school coaches and, it has worked out really well. And one of my goals is just to get a bunch of the Alabama players over here and just to see Mississippi State. And of course, we know, if Alabama, Auburn are after a guy, we're probably not going to get those players. But our goal is to get those guys that they don't get. And there's still some pretty good football players in the state of Alabama, as you know.
Absolutely. I don't know if there was any stars back when we were coming out of high school, but I don't think I would have made 2-star.
No.
But George O'Leary did get me ready for Coach Bryant. I had George O'Leary was my high school coach. So
Oh, I didn't know. That's right. Yeah.
yeah. So I've been pretty blessed in my life with coaches. Eh, Joe?
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
What's Coach O'Leary doing now?
He's retired. He's just had a couple of knee replacements, but I talk to him quite often, and I do need to go see him for sure.
Great.
Joey, I love you. Miss you, brother.
You too, man.
And good luck with what you're doing. And I appreciate everything you do for hundreds and thousands of kids over the years. Thank you, brother.
Well, you too, man. I know you got into that world. Always respected how you treated the players. I could see, your genuine way of coaching, and you're basically volunteering a lot of time to work with those guys, bringing them to Mobile, and and I know you brought them to other places, and just always being interested in what you're doing with the podcast. So you're a people person, and always been a great guy. So great talking to you again, man.
Thanks, Joey. Good luck. Talk to you soon, buddy.
Okay, bud. Take care.
Okay,